Do you remember the activity where we asked half the people to leave the room and half the people to stay in the room? And the people who were in the room were the managers, and the people who were out of the room were the team members. And the team members had a difficulty outside of work. Their partner was ill. They were trying to bring up kids and drop them off at the daycare centre and all that sort of stuff. The person inside the room, the manager, didn't know this. What they did know is they noticed that the person had been making some silly errors and causing fights in the office and all of this sort of stuff. And we said, what we want you to do, managers, is we would like you to deliver some feedback to this person who is not performing at the moment, and we want you to do two things. We want you to point a lot, and we want you to use the word you a lot. And so, of course, the two people came back together again. The team members came in and the manager sat them down and basically gave it to them. You've been doing this, you've been causing fights, you've been making some stupid errors. What's your problem? And we stopped it at that point and we asked the people outside to describe what it was like to work with their manager based on this interaction. And of course the response was very much they're rude, they're judgmental, they have no idea what's going on, and most people decided that they weren't going to tell the manager what was really going on outside of work. So we identified from that when delivering feedback to someone who is competent and not committed, when counselling someone, using the word you and pointing does not help. What it does is it increases the likelihood that we get defensiveness and therefore reduces the likelihood that we find out the true cause of the low commitment. So then you might remember we swapped everyone over and we gave the people inside, the managers, this time we gave them a very different tool. And this was the tool that we gave them. We said that when you deliver feedback using the word you, it is very judgmental. It forces you to make a judgment about what is true for the other person, and you have no right to do that. So what we need to do is deliver feedback using the word I instead of the word you. And what this does is it encourages you to talk about what is true for you, which you have every right to do. So you might remember we started off with something nice. I remember. And some people in the room were going, oh, here we go, the old, the feedback sandwich. Give them something nasty. Sorry, tell them the nice bit, put the nasty bit in the middle and finish up with a nice bit at down the bottom sort of thing. We identified that there's a bit more happening than just this. What's happening here is that we are setting up the contrast. We want to say, here's the person I remember, and now I'm getting this performance. There's a difference. And if we show them that contrast, a bit like the Weight Watchers commercials, then we don't need to make any judgments. They will make all the judgments that are necessary. We just need to show that contrast. So we start off with, I remember. I remember 6 months ago when you were working on that project and everyone was giving you a hard time, but because of the creative stuff that you came up with, because of the extra hours you put in, because of your level of commitment, not only did you get the project done, but you also saved the company a load of money as well. So well done, thank you very much. We start off with something positive. We also talked about how there is a tendency to use the word but, however, or although at that point. And we identified that all those words serve to do is destroy all of the good that we have just done. So we need to avoid those words. And indeed, they are unnecessary in this context. All we need to do is go full stop, new paragraph, capital letter. Recently, I have observed, or more conversationally, recently I've noticed. And this is where we need to deliver the feedback, avoiding the use of the word you, and it is possible if we have done the behaviour description generator really well. And we identified that there is a big difference between saying things like, recently I've noticed that you've been causing fights at the office, you've been arriving at work late, you've been leaving early, and you've been making some silly errors, and recently I've noticed that there has been an increased level of tension in the office. I've also noticed that there has been a preference to arrive at work late and leave a little bit early. And I've also noticed some errors creep in where I have not seen errors before. Said all of the same stuff without using the word you. We also identified that at this stage some people might try and bait you by saying things like, are you talking about me? in which case we are to simply confirm that we are by saying yes, and then continuing with the process that we talked about. Because if we go off the track with the process, if we lose the process, this is where things go astray. This is where we start to get ourselves into hot water. So we need to get back to the process. So to say something like, recently I've noticed that there's been increased level of tension in the office, there's been a preference to arrive at work late, leave a little bit early, there's also been some errors creep in where I haven't seen errors before. And I'm thinking to myself that this is not the John I'm used to working with. Or I'm thinking to myself that this is not what was discussed at the beginning of the year. Or I'm thinking to myself that this is not going to help us achieve the goals that we discussed. Just one of those, 3 will freak them out. So I feel concerned, or I feel confused. Avoid the disappointeds or upsets or angries. We can use them later if the behaviour continues, if the behaviour doesn't change. At this stage, the first time, the fireside chat, it is about being concerned. And then we said, so I feel concerned, and what I would like, what I desire, what I would like is, I would really like to get performance back to the level we had 6 months ago, because that was fantastic. And then to ask a question to put the ball in their court. Generally speaking, rule of thumb, a question with the word I in it will work better than a question with the word you in it. Notice the difference. So I want to know what your problem is. I want to know if there's something you want to tell me. As opposed to, so have I got the whole picture? Is there something I'm missing? And so our counselling session starts off with this message that sounds something like, thanks for coming in, John. Just wanted to start off by saying that I remember about 6 months ago when you were working on that project, and everyone was giving you a hard time about it, and they were saying that you can't do it, can't be done. But because of the creative ideas that you came up with, and because of the excellent extra effort that you put in, not only did you get it done on time, but you also saved the company hundreds of thousands of dollars. Once again, that was fantastic work. Thank you very much. Recently, I've noticed a number of things. I've noticed that there has been some increased tension in the office. I've also noticed that there's been a preference to leave work early and arrive a little bit late. And I've also noticed that there's been some errors creep in where I haven't seen errors before. And so I'm thinking to myself that this is not the John I'm used to working with. So I feel quite concerned. And what I would like is I would really like to get performance back to the level we had 6 months ago. So have I got the whole picture? And if we do that, we dramatically increase the likelihood that the person is going to tell us the true cause of the change in levels of commitment. So we asked you to design one of these messages and then practice delivering it. And when you practice delivering it, we asked you to start to think about the sort of responses that you may get. And of course, inevitably what happens is people start thinking about the worst case scenario, the most difficult response that we're going to get. And what we identified there is that sometimes people have a preference to think and sometimes they have a preference to feel. And we identified that these operate like a seesaw. One operates at the expense of the other. For example, when we fall in love, all ability to make rational judgment has left us. Oh, they're gorgeous, I love her, she's beautiful. No, she's a loser, dump her, run away, be afraid, sort of thing. The opposite is also true. Sometimes we are thinking and we are logical to the point that there is no warmth. So one operates at the expense of the other. You cannot do both at the same time. You may switch between one and the other very quickly, but you are either thinking or you are feeling. And we identified that all of the worst case scenarios that we could come up with reflected that what people are often doing is that they are feeling, not thinking. It's a natural human response when receiving feedback. So in order to deal with this, we employed the skills of dealing with customer complaints. And we identified that there's a process when people are feeling, not thinking, that we can use in order to help the person process the emotion so that we can get them to a thinking state. We can get them to start to move forward. Because we identified that the first step really is to just listen. Let them go for it. We would do this with an angry customer. We know that if we interrupt an angry customer, they just get angrier. So really the first step with someone who we are delivering feedback to, if they are being emotional, which is a perfectly understandable human response, our first step is to listen with empathy. So again, yeah, oh really, oh no, is that right? I didn't know that. This sort of stuff is going to help, so that as we do this, the feeling component starts to drop and the thinking component starts to switch on. And if we do this well, they will reach that point that will indicate to us that perhaps their brain is almost ready to be switched back on, so therefore they may be ready for a solution, because a solution is a logical process. And if we present our solution, our best solution, when they're being emotional, we've lost it. They're going to shoot holes in it no matter how brilliant our solution is, because they are being emotional, not logical. So the first step is to process that emotion and wait till they get to that point. And we can tell when they're at that point because a whole variety of things change. Their body language changes. The verbal language that they use changes. Their face will change. All of these things will indicate to us that perhaps they are at that point. And then in order for us to check that they're at that point, we may need to ask a few questions. Easy, simple, uncontroversial questions just to check our understanding. So that was the other day, is that correct? Right. And was that before lunch or it was before lunch? Right. Simple questions like this so that we can make sure that they have switched their brain back on. And also, in order to answer these questions, they need to switch their brain back on. They're logical questions. If we get an emotional response to these questions, so if we ask something like, so when was that? Was that Tuesday or Wednesday? And we get a response like, it was Wednesday, I told you it was Wednesday, what are you, not listening? Then what we need to do is go back to step one. If, however, we get a response like, no, look, it must have been Wednesday because, yes, it was Wednesday. Tuesday I was actually out of the office, so it was Wednesday. If we get a response like this, it indicates that the brain may have started to switch itself back on. So then they might be ready for a solution. So the next step is then, of course, to thank them. If we were with a customer, that's what we do. Thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. Obviously, we don't like to do business this way. Now we can fix it. We would thank the customer. And the same needs to happen when we're dealing with a team member who has had an emotional response to the feedback that we're given. They've told us their side of the story, and there's two sides to every coin. So then what we need to say is something like, look, thanks very much for that. I didn't realise that was the case. There's some things in here that really have come as quite a surprise to me. And then what we can do is we may need to create some thinking time. I need to have a bit of a think about this, and I'll get back to you, because there's some stuff in here I didn't expect, so I need to get back to you. And then sometimes what we need to do, particularly with an angry customer, is we need to create some space. They need to go off, and we need to go off, and just need to go and talk to my manager, and I'll be back with you in 5 minutes or whatever it is, or I'll call you back before the end of the day. And then, of course, we get back to them. Same may need to happen with a team member after delivering some feedback, after counselling them, after having a fireside chat. We may need to say to them, look, I need to go and have a bit of a think about this. I need to check up on a few things and I'll get back. Or you may need to say something like, how about I go make you a cup of coffee? Or how about I go and grab a cup of tea, or whatever it is to create the time, and then you need to get back to them. And that get back to them is so important. You might remember we talked about the story of Cool Hand Luke and how he earned respect, not by winning, but by getting back up. That's how he earned respect. And this is an excellent opportunity to earn respect. Doesn't guarantee that you're going to win. What it guarantees, however, is that if you do keep getting back, is you will earn respect. And so what we've got here is a technique to help us, first of all, start the counselling conversation as well as we can, to recognise that people's responses are human responses, and we've got a technique to help us deal with those very human responses. And what we can always come back to is the what I would like. So the person has their response, we can get back to them with what I need is, I need to see this level of behaviour from here on in how we're going to generate that level of behaviour. And that is how we can start out and deal with our counselling session with the person who is low commitment and high competence.